Good afternoon, everybody out there, and welcome to another edition of RecruitMilitary Live, a continuing series of live broadcasts covering all things military transition, veteran employment, mil-spouse employment, and much, much more. My name is Lucas Connolly. I'm a retired U.S. Army officer and former TAP program manager, here to share with you the ins and outs of navigating the turbulent waters of civilian employment. So if you're in search of meaningful employment, you're in the right place. Please visit rmvets.com/live to learn more. Okay, folks, let's roll. From our earliest days of military service, we learn the importance of leadership at all levels. We learn that solid leadership can mean the difference between success and failure, and that wearing the mantle of leadership can be a weighty and very sobering responsibility. When we hang up our boots for the last time, as they say, enter civilian life, are we called upon perhaps to abandon those leadership lessons that we've learned over the years? I think not, and I think our guest today would agree. Today's guest started his career in the military in the late 1970s, enlisting in the United States Marine Corps. His career spanned over 2 decades and included service as a drill instructor, as well as combat operations in Operation Desert Storm. Since leaving the service, he's had a long civilian career, including, among other things, 25 years with UPS, 6 years with the VA, and some time spent with the Army Corps of Engineers. Additionally, he's done work in the nonprofit sector. He's been a podcaster, a veteran advocate, and is in both his professional and personal life committed countless hours to the military community through veteran advocacy. He continues to promote the need for exceptional leadership skills in all facets of life. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Mr. Hiram Figueroa.
Hey, good morning, Lucas. Thank you and welcome. I feel welcome and thank you. It's a pleasure to be on your show, and I'm very humbled that you've been able to reach out to me. And I'm looking forward to having a form of collaboration, not only for you, but for the audience and for those veterans that are in that process transition. Maybe we can learn something from each other. So
I got to admit, though, I'm a little intimidated. I don't think there's anything more frightening on the planet than a Marine Corps drill instructor.
You know what? I'll tell you, being a Marine Corps drill instructor, and a lot of guys focus on special operations and everything else, but you can say as you're an Army officer, when you have a drill sergeant, when you have a drill instructor, right, that's your first special operations, idol to be able to come in. And we have a high attrition rate as well and high standards to be able to mold, train, and set you up for success if you choose to be able to join the Marine Corps or any branch of the service. So for me, that's something that will always stay in me, right? I cherish it, but as you well know during the introduction, it's great to have that transition because a lot of people lose it after they get out.
All right. Well, if I make any mistakes at any point in time during the broadcast, let me know and I'll owe you 20 at the end. All right, folks, now that you know who we are, we'd like to hear who you are. Feel free to hit us up in that chat window. All right. Hit us in the comments. Let us know where you're at, where you're from, who you're with, who you serve with, what your status is. Are you active duty considering retirement? Are you just on the right-hand side of that DD-214? Or are you fresh into your career and you're looking for some long-range advice? Either way, myself and Hiram are here to answer your questions if you have them. So hit up that chat. Questions, comments, issues, and concerns, and time allowing, we will address them. Now, Hiram, let's dive right into the topic of military leadership. You spent a lot of time in the Marines with leadership at multiple levels, both in the training environment, garrison environment, and of course in combat. What leadership traits would you say when you look at your fellow Marines or fellow service members, for that matter, that distinguish a good enough leader from a great leader?
Commitment. And the person's got to be committed. People can selectively be having that leadership traits and those leadership principles, but that one specific trait that we're looking at, Lucas, if we're going on the field out and we're going anything else, we don't get along. But if you are committed to follow directions and committed to ensure that if something happens to me, that you take over, that's the key word that we're looking for, commitment. You got to be able to commit. It's got to come from your soul. You got to be able to commit. That type of word of commitment and that type of obligation sets forth the platform, not only for integrity, transparency, and grit, but commitment is the biggest thing that we look for. So just want to let you know that.
Yeah, and in certain environments, when soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines put their confidence in you and put even their lives on the line for you, and by extension, their mothers and fathers. No doubt, you've been to a lot of graduation ceremonies. Mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, looking at you, saying, you did a great job. Thanks for taking care of my young man, my young lady out here. Um, a single moment of wavering can unravel a leader's perception, right? It just could be just a small kink in the armor, a fracture in the glass, a moment of doubt. Have you ever seen that? Perhaps a drill sergeant or a fellow leader within the Marine Corps waver, stumble, and just fall apart?
Yeah, I seen it stumble. I even stumble. I can give you my own testimonial. As becoming an up and coming leader, you're full of testosterone. You're full of high commitment. But if you don't have the status quo, the experience, the battle tested experience to be able to lead people, you will show that in your kink of armor, and people will see it. Once you display that, then two things happen. Either you learn from it or you continue to display that becomes a flaw. And then if you are in a position of leadership, that could be an issue where people would choose to follow you or not, or question your leadership based on how you deliver yourself or present yourself to the general public, to your command, to your teammates, to your teams, your fire teams, your squad, and communicating with your squad leads, especially when you're communicating from the enlisted part to the officers. The officers have a different perspective of how enlisted leadership comes. If you're not seasoned enough to be able to take that type of language and transition it to your understanding, then you're losing that credibility because you're showing that kink of that armor, if that makes sense to you.
It's interesting because I remember my relationship with my platoon sergeants, and I had some great ones. I really did. I had some great NCOs. I had some ones that weren't perhaps by my own fault. We didn't get along well. But I remember my platoon sergeant telling me, it's my job to help you succeed. It's my job to help you look good. Then recently, I was in a leadership development class and session. They talked about leading up, making sure that your next level boss, your manager, your supervisor, what you're doing at your level supports their success, because you have shared success. They can't fail and you succeed, and vice versa. And so it's interesting to hear that in the civilian sector, something that I was told 20, 30 years ago by my own platoon sergeant.
That's true, right? Here's the thing. Most veterans, right, they have that ingrained perspective of leadership traits and leadership principles. But the only thing is that I wouldn't say fail. They do not recognize the challenges once they go and leave the military environment into transition, because then they're not able to take that leadership skill and translate it into a business setting, to an entrepreneur setting, to a personal development setting. If you're you're getting out of the military and you're talking to people, and then all of a sudden something stresses you out, you start whipping out the knife hand and you start talking. Hey, we're going to get this done. You're going to get this done. You're telling people what to do instead of leading yourself to lead people to buy into what you're leading to. So that kind of language is very prevalent in today. And that's why people today, especially the veterans that are coming in there, they're having challenges that they say they can lead, but when they're in a corporate business, workable environment where people say, well, thank you for your service, but what do you know about leadership? That becomes an awkward conversation in itself. What do you say about that?
I still think there's no better attention getter than a strong knife hand. Now, you talk about carrying forward some of those skills, going to the civilian market, right? So you spend a significant amount of time in the Marine Corps, leading at multiple levels, and then go to a civilian company to work for UPS. Now, you must have been successful. It looks like you clocked over 20 years there. And you talked for just a minute here a few seconds ago about you can't just knife hand your way to success. You got to do some things just a little different. What would you say are some of those transitional changes, some of those leadership adaptations that you either intentionally made or discovered that you needed to make to be successful at a civilian company?
So what I discovered that I needed a mentor to be able to adjust to the language of corporate America, right? Because I was in a high level position in the military. So a lot of us that are at a high tier level, we think that we can do everything, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
believe that we're capable of doing it. We got meritoriously promoted. We've been in charge of a battalion, a regiment. We know exactly what's going on. But guess what? That's a military culture. Now, when you go to the civilian culture, things are very much gray. They're not black and white. So the language of philosophy comes into play to how to be able to use that philosophy technique to have somebody buy into your leadership, using tact and looking forward for them to jump in, whether you tell them to, take a leap, you give them a nice tactful response, they'll buy into it. But that's the challenge that's going on. I've learned that the hard way because I was very blunt and direct and very high stress, very intense. Uh, During my time, early stages of UPS, hey, I was yelling at customers. No, I'm just talking loud. So I had to pay attention to my audience, right, and understand that these people are pretty much soft, but now they're viewing me as a problematic person coming out of the military that doesn't know how to deal with the general public. Now you've seen it as well. When you're talking to people, they get all involved. They remember what they're holding on to, the memory of being in the military, but now they're in the present state of in civilian world. Now they're having challenges to be able to make that transition, but let go of that identity. That identity is still with you, but you got to be able to reinvent yourself, and you don't need to advocate or, more or less announce that you were in the military. People can see it, if that makes sense to you.
No, absolutely, because we get raised up on in the military on authority. Again, our officers get their authority from the President of the United States. We all take an oath to support and defend the Constitution. We're empowered by UCMJ, to be able to exercise authority over our service members, be they Marine soldiers, airmen, or sailors. And then, and I hit the same thing when I started working with the first company that I worked for after the military, when I told somebody they were going to do something and they pushed back. And my response was, hey, I'm the boss. You're going to do it because I said so. And then about 20 minutes later, I couldn't find that person because they banged out. They hit the clock and went home. And they said, oh, my back hurts. I don't feel well. I'm going home. And they just left. And I said, whoa, what happened? I said, well, and then, later the conversation, you just can't holler and yell at people and think they're going to do what you want them to do.
That's true. That's why even by people think that I was drill instructor, but I'm not going to be using drill instructor language in the corporate American world. That's considered in today's world as hostile work environment and bullying. You're bullying your way to leverage your position and hold people hostage on your position, exercising your 2 inches of power to be able to give them a directive when they have the freedom of choice. They can choose. They can refuse not to do anything, or they can file a complaint on you saying that you're doing something unethical. And that's what's happening in the crosshairs of a lot of veterans today, because they don't understand the labor laws and they don't understand the personal actions or the work cultures that can significantly affect them, and they can create professional suicide in the workplace, if that makes sense to you.
No, absolutely. It's real easy, and I'm not ashamed to say that very early in my post-military career, I found myself in the HR office trying to explain my poor choice of language, poor choice of influence techniques, and very quickly had to wake up and recognize you've got to be you've got to communicate more. You've got to communicate more often. You've got to communicate a vision and get the buy-in. And once people have bought into your vision, they'll willingly follow you, not feel like they've been dragged by the nose.
I agree with you. Here's my recommendation for a lot of people that are having those challenges. Find a mentor. There's things on YouTube that personal develop. There's a thing called Stoicism. Stoicism is a big YouTube channel that I use. It's been around for 2,000 years, right? But they still use that same philosophy. They teach you how to be able to respond to certain situations that are pretty much confrontational, and they're pretty much mental, and then they affect you ethically. So if you don't understand those dynamics, I recommend people that are getting out of the military to set them up for success. If they're looking for a recruiter or anything like that, get a personal mentor to help them ease on to a work culture that they don't find themselves pinned to a wall or question everything that they are saying, because in the general public, they don't make sense. If that makes sense to you.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. And in fact, I've got a copy of Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius back there. I've had so many people lately tell me dive into that, and I'm actually doing a cross comparison right now between Dr. Travis. I forgot his name, the fellow who wrote Emotional Habits, and Travis Bradbury, and Epictetus, and seeing some of the similarities there. Now, you left UPS, mind you, an inefficiency-driven, profit and loss-driven, for-profit business environment. And from there, you've had some experiences working with the federal government, which if you've never had the pleasure, I don't recommend it. But in all seriousness, you went to work for the VA. You had some time with the Corps of Engineers. Now you're in a different environment. It's government service. It's not P&L driven. Slightly different metrics for success. How does that affect the way that you lead?
Let me put it to you. There's a lot of restrictions, right? And so in the VA, back when I started, it's all about the veterans, right? But here's the thing and this is a true caveat. So federal service employees, don't get offended. I've been exposed to that. So what happens when you have a long tenure in the federal service, things are not what they seem to be in the real world, in the corporate world, because they don't focus on production. It's more or less like politics or whatever suits them. It becomes more of a narcissistic, nepotism, minion-driven society. So with that, it doesn't help you as a leader to challenge the person that doesn't know how to lead, even though they have that title. And that becomes a problem. So the old saying, stay within your pay grade, stay in your lane, and you won't crash. So for us, right, that was very hard for me, because good initiative, bad judgment. You did something wrong, you beg for forgiveness later, but they crucify you, right? Because you meant well. And because we take charge, we want to do everything and save everything. The federal government, it's a galaxy of its own. From the VA to the Army Corps Engineers, they have their own culture, their own language, their own way of dealing with things that might not be a fit for people, right? And for me, I can tell you that during my time in those two agencies, I learned a lot, but I learned a lot of things not to do, not to put myself in a position to be caught up in the crossfires, because I made good initiative but bad judgment, if that makes sense to you.
No, it makes absolute sense. And I found that, in the military, when you know the right answer, whether you're in command, you're a first sergeant, platoon sergeant, platoon leader, combat leader, sometimes you can be alone and be right. And that's enough. And I've been in that situation where I knew what I was doing was right. 99 out of 100 people around me said what I was doing was wrong. In the end, command and leadership then can be a very lonely place. But I've found that doesn't really work in the civilian sector, because even if you are right, you've lost the team ability. You've lost the team. Even if you are right, despite that, you've lost the team. So what I've hit upon is this one step in the Cotter model of change management. It's called build a coalition of support. Make sure that other people understand that there's a problem, believe there's a problem, concur with you that there's a problem, and then build a team that agrees with you, then move forward. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, it is. It's pretty much it's all different types of lines of effort, right? You got to be able to have those lines of effort and then collaborate, and then more or less have these people buy into it. But the biggest thing, Lucas, is here's the biggest challenge that I learned, and I've been out for a while. If you don't know how to lead yourself, to hold yourself accountable and be aware of what you do in front of an audience, in front of people are going to give you that body language that they're not going to have that buy-in. That's going to tell you more or less that you are not connecting with the immediate workforce, the people that you work with, even the people that you associate with. You feel that you're okay. You're talking in a language that they don't understand. They stay quiet, and they just watch you go on a tangent, you go on a rant. So when you start doing that, you lose focus of what your main objective is. If I'm wanting to lead Lucas or have a conversation with Lucas of how we should be able to work together and set you up for success. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I heard someone say one time, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, build a team.
Right. I just had one guy, I trained him, right? I'm doing him, I'm onboarding him. So when I came into this different agency that I won't mention, uh, it took them 11 months to onboard me because they were using the politics and the union rules. Nothing got accomplished. So moving fast forward, I had the opportunity to onboard a new person come in. Took me 3 days to get it done completely, completely in the right way, not in a military way. I used the military tactics in a corporate, in a federal government setting to set the person in success and follow up with him by communicating and saying open-ended questions. Do you know what you're going through? Do you understand? Do you understand what I'm saying? Give him some follow-up. This gave the person who was a prior service, but still a civilian, an opportunity to make, you know, responses, remarks, or judgments of how they are. So at the end of those 72 hours that took me 11 months, my superiors were surprised at how well I did it because I was new to this agency as well. What does it mean? It means that you need to be seasoned and you have to have quite a few battles to be battle tested when you're across another scenario that gives you an opportunity to lead. And when you're able to lead, remember how you were treated and what would you do differently if given the opportunity to lead again, to showcase that even though your prior service, you don't need to demonstrate prior service attributes. You need to utilize the tools in a setting that can create and showcase that you are an effective leader by those actions, if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. Um, I've heard some people say, and again, not a universal trope by any means, that some civilian employers do not appreciate military leadership experience, or as we might say, management experience, depending on the vocabulary you choose to roll out. If you had 100 hiring managers, CEOs, COOs in a room, you had a chance to communicate to them why. Why should they hire veterans? Why should they hire veterans, particularly veterans with extensive leadership experience like yourself?
Well, let me put it to you this way. We've been in enough conflict. I think a lot of CEOs, and especially now, we've been in a 20-year campaign from 9/11 to Iraq to Afghanistan, right? And a lot of lives have changed. A couple of things that I want to share with CEOs that we are coachable, we are capable, we are dependable, right? And we know what it takes to be able to utilize the mission. Also, we have the skill set to use time management skills and follow procedures and complete the mission. We actually do the follow up. Given the opportunity, if you give us communication, we can ensure that that mission is taken care of and completed as you ask without being micromanaged. Given the CEOs and the CEOs, if you do not micromanage, which is the biggest 101 micromanaged lack of leadership, which are KPIs and KSAs, you give the person enough rope to fail forward. That will tell you if the person fails and they succeed, you have someone that is capable and is a high caliber employee or a high caliber candidate for that job description. You have to be given the opportunity to that individual, should be able to give that person the opportunity, individual, to identify what they can do. You cannot enable them or micromanage them because those are two forms of control and you're not going to be successful. And how are you going to get your return investment down the road if you're doing those action items? So that's what I say, you know?
Yeah, and I love that because it really kind of points to servant leadership. It's a matter of in with respect to enabling, removing barriers, providing resources, giving guidance, addressing concerns quickly. I love it, and I appreciate that. And I hope there's some business leaders out there that heard every word you just said, because adding veterans to your staff means adding capable people who might not necessarily know your industry yet, but who are ready to manage given their first opportunity. Hiram, if you had just
anybody, real quick,
go ahead, brother.
No, sorry. Look, you just got to give them an opportunity to manage, right? That's all I got to say. You got to give them a chance. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I just needed to add that.
No, I'm with you 100%. And I've often told folks that I've coached in the past, you may not know how to make a widget. You may not know how to do the sales thing, whatever that company does, making things, whether they make soda or they make cheese or they sell cars or insurance or invest other people's money. You might not know how to do that thing yet. But once you do, compound your new industry knowledge with your management experience, and your career trajectory is going to take off like a rocket. I mean, have you seen that with some of your fellow veterans?
I've seen that quite a bit. And here's the thing. You got to be able to know your climate, right? And know exactly what's coming on and see how that's going to play out. Just like you see coaches that are coaching basketball teams, Olympic people, Olympic teams, they're just sitting there. They're analyzing situations. They give an opportunity to be able to bring some foresight to the team members and say, hey, this is what I see. If you can do this, you can do this. We can be able to move the needle, right? We can be able to. Those are the types of lines of effort that we have to be able to demonstrate for these individuals. But back to your original question, yes, I've seen it.
Awesome. As we begin to wind down, I'm sure we can continue this conversation for hours, and I'd love to have you back again sometime so we can continue the line of conversation. But if you had an opportunity to address service members that are getting ready to get out, they've made the decision, it's time to go get that DD-214. They're getting ready to head out to the job environment, to the civilian sector for the first time. You can give them just one piece of advice. What might it be?
This is the advice I give them. If you know you're going to get out, commit to getting out, right? Set a plan. If you don't set a plan, you're going to plan to fail. Find out if you're going to get out within a year, find somebody that can actually do a resume that's relatable, that can take your acronyms to be able to have transferable skills. Find someone that can coach you to be able to do an interview. Do the research. Have a panel of people that you have in your inner circle when they do a mock interview to be able to see where you're at. Set you up for success. Make sure all your documents are taken care of, but make sure that when you apply for a job vacancy, that it's a fit for you and you're not trying to fit in for them. So
absolutely makes sense. That's great advice. It's great advice, and I hope the folks out there were listening. Hiram, before we run out of time, can you take a minute and tell us just a little bit about Warrior Rescue?
So Warrior Rescue is a brand new nonprofit organization. We are geared with several professionals to be able to empower the veterans to be economically empowered in today's society, due to the fact of, we notice that veterans are left behind. The illegal immigrants are getting a stipend. They're getting housing. They're getting a bus ticket or a plane ticket to be able to do things. We are going to teach the veterans to be able to get their housing, give them opportunities to set them up for success, and educate them to be able to have mentors like myself to set them to a point where they are not just asking for money. They're learning how to develop that skill set and earn the financial income that they deserve. That's what we do.
That's awesome. It's great advice. It sounds like you're doing great things. Hiram, thanks for being on the show today. It was a real pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your audience, and I hope to talk to you soon again.
Awesome. For the folks out there in internet land, if you haven't already done so, do yourself a solid. Use the link rmvets.com/live. That'll take you to our website where you'll find over several 100,000, sometimes 300,000, 400,000 jobs from tens of thousands of employers around the world and around the corner. You'll find information about our job fairs, our webinars, our resume classes, advanced employment skills. It's a one-stop resource. Come on in, check out what we have. Much of what Hiram was talking about as far as getting your documentation in order. We have templates, we have examples, we have instruction, and it's all free of charge. Recruit Military is on a mission to help veterans, transition service members, mil spouses find meaningful employment opportunities. So come on down and check us out. This has been Lucas Connolly for Recruit Military Live. Until next time, folks, good luck and Godspeed.
Thank you.